You think they loved you, they praised you, they smiled. Then one day your light was a threat. If someone wants to erase your voice, your joy, your very existence, they won't always pick up a knife. They'll get quiet, clever, patient. I'm going to give you 6 secret signs that the narcissist in your life doesn't just dislike you, they want you gone. Not always literally. Often they want you dead in the way that matters. Dead to hope, dead to reputation, dead to joy. Listen close. This could save you. They don't start with shouting, they start with questions that sound innocent. Are you sure that's what happened? I don't think you remember it right. You're too sensitive. Over time, these words dig small holes in your confidence. You begin to second-guess everything, your choices, your reactions, even your sense of reality. This is not an accident. This is a design. A narcissist knows that if they can make you question your own truth, they never have to prove theirs. They rewrite your story scene by scene until you no longer trust the movie playing in your own mind. At first, you defend yourself, you bring evidence, you try to explain, to clarify, to reason. But reasoning with a narcissist is like trying to light a candle in a hurricane. The more you defend your truth, the harder they blow. They will twist your words, deny things they said hours ago, and when you finally react, when frustration spills out of you, they'll point at your emotion and say, "See, you're unstable." The trap closes quietly. You stop arguing not because you agree, but because it's exhausting to fight for air in a room they've already filled with smoke. You start editing yourself. You hesitate before speaking, wondering how your words will be turned against you. You begin apologizing for things that aren't wrong, for feelings that are valid, for memories that actually happened. That's how they erase your reality, through repetition, not rage. They don't destroy your world overnight. They dismantle it piece by piece until you live in theirs. And in their world, you're always mistaken, always overreacting, always less. The most dangerous part of this is how invisible it looks from the outside. To others, the narcissist seems charming, intelligent, composed. They say the right things, wear the right mask, play the perfect victim. Meanwhile, you're losing sleep, doubting your sanity, shrinking into someone you barely recognize. People might even say you're lucky to have them, and you nod because you don't have the strength to explain the invisible bruises. You wonder if maybe you are the problem. That's exactly where they want you, confused, compliant, and silent. But here's the truth they can't erase. If you feel smaller every time you interact with someone, if you walk away from conversations questioning your worth, that's not love, that's control. Reality isn't something you need permission to hold on to. Your memories are yours. Your emotions are evidence that you are alive, not proof that you're broken. The way out begins with one small act of defiance, believing yourself again. Start writing things down, document what happens, speak your truth aloud to someone who sees you clearly. Each time you name a lie, you reclaim a piece of your reality. Each time you stop explaining yourself to someone committed to misunderstanding you, you regain a little more power. You don't need to convince the narcissist, you need to reconnect with yourself. They can blur your vision, but they can't erase your eyes. Remember, confusion is their weapon, but clarity is your defense. Once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. And once you stand in your truth, they lose the power to rewrite your story ever again. They start by planting small seeds of doubt about the people closest to you. I don't think your friend really supports you. Your family doesn't understand you like I do. That coworker seems jealous. These comments seem protective at first, even loving, but they're not. They're strategic. Each seed is designed to isolate you, to make you suspicious of anyone who could remind you who you really are. The narcissist knows they can't fully control you while you still have connection, so they start cutting your ties one by one, quietly, subtly, surgically. You'll notice it begins with distance. Your phone rings less. Messages go unanswered. People you used to laugh with start to pull back. You can't figure out why. What you don't see is the behind-the-scenes manipulation. The narcissist has whispered poison into their ears. Little lies, twisted stories, selective truths. I'm worried about them. They've been acting unstable. They said something harsh about you, but I told them it wasn't true. They disguise their sabotage as concern. So when others begin to drift away, it looks organic. You start believing maybe it's you. Maybe you are too much, too emotional, too dramatic. That's exactly what they want you to think. As isolation grows, you lean harder into the narcissist for comfort, unaware that they built the loneliness you're now running from. They become your only source of validation, the only voice you trust. And then they begin to control that voice too. If you try to reconnect with others, they'll guilt you. Why would you want to see them after everything they did? If you challenge the narrative, they'll play the victim. I'm the only one who's been here for you. Slowly, your world shrinks until all roads lead back to them. It's a slow and quiet death, not of your body, but of your community. When you're cut off from support, you stop hearing your reflection in other people's eyes. You lose the mirror that shows you who you were before the manipulation. And once you're alone, they can shape your reality without interference. That's when the most dangerous stage begins. They'll rewrite history, twist your emotions, even make you question your own instincts, because there's no one left to remind you of the truth. What makes this so insidious is how believable they are. Narcissists are experts at appearing caring and credible. They can charm your family, win over your friends, even fool therapists. By the time you realize you've been isolated, the damage feels irreversible, but it isn't. The antidote to isolation is reconnection. Reach out to even one person from your past who felt safe. You don't need to explain everything, just rebuild contact, however small. The narcissist's greatest fear is you remembering you have allies. Every time you make a phone call, send a message, or share your truth with someone who believes you, you take back ground they thought they'd stolen forever. Isolation was their weapon, but connection is your rebellion. You were never meant to survive alone, and once you remember that, they lose their hold completely. They never insult you outright, at least not in the beginning. They're too clever for that. Instead, they wrap their cruelty in silk. They laugh while they do it. Relax, I'm just joking. You're too sensitive. Can't you take a little teasing? But the jokes always cut deep, don't they? They poke at your insecurities, your flaws, your soft spots, the ones you revealed in moments of trust. What was once a moment of intimacy becomes ammunition. You begin to dread the next conversation because every interaction feels like walking barefoot on broken glass while they smile as if nothing's wrong. Humiliation is their favorite form of control because it destroys you from the inside out. It's public enough to make you feel small, but subtle enough that no one else notices. They might make a joke about your weight, your intelligence, your dreams, and when you flinch, they act surprised. You know I didn't mean it like that. But they did. They always do. Each harmless jab chips away at your confidence until you stop showing up as your full self. You speak less, you laugh less. You shrink in rooms where you once shone just to avoid becoming the punchline again. The cycle is calculated. They hurt you, then comfort you. They shame you, then praise you. They knock you down, then tell you they love you. This emotional whiplash keeps you tethered, confused, and desperate for their approval. You start to measure your worth through their reactions, hoping that if you're careful enough, quiet enough, agreeable enough, they'll stop making you feel so small. But that's the trap. Their power depends on your shrinking. They'll never stop because your humiliation feeds their superiority. The most dangerous part is how invisible this abuse looks to others. To the outside world, they're charming, funny even. People laugh at their jokes, not realizing they're watching a perform. Man's built on your pain, and when you try to explain it, you sound petty. He just teases you, they'll say. She's just being playful. So you begin to doubt yourself again. You start to believe maybe you are too sensitive, maybe you can't take a joke. That self-doubt is the scar tissue of psychological warfare. Humiliation turns into silence. Silence turns into self-blame. And self-blame turns into surrender. That's how they win. Not through force, but through erosion. They don't destroy your self-esteem in one blow. They starve it slowly until you stop feeding it yourself. But here's what they don't expect. Awareness breaks the spell. The moment you name what's happening, when you whisper, "That wasn't a joke, that was cruelty," the illusion cracks. You start reclaiming your dignity by refusing to laugh at what hurts you. You stop explaining your pain to people committed to misunderstanding it. You remember that kindness never needs to disguise itself as sarcasm. Real love doesn't humiliate, it protects. The next time someone makes you feel small and calls it humor, don't shrink. Stand taller. Look them in the eye and let silence do the talking. Because when you stop participating in your own belittlement, their power collapses. Humiliation only works if you stay seated in shame. The moment you rise, the joke's on them. They know exactly which buttons to press. They study you, your fears, your triggers, your limits, and then they push, slowly at first, then harder. They turn calm moments into chaos, peace into tension, love into combat. You begin each day wondering which version of them you'll get, the charming one who makes you laugh, or the cold one who twists your words until you feel crazy. And when you finally snap, when exhaustion boils over into anger or tears, they cross their arms and say, "See, this is why no one can deal with you." It's psychological entrapment disguised as emotional reaction. A narcissist doesn't need to hit you to make you break. They just need to make you react. Their goal is to provoke you until you appear like the unstable one. They gaslight you, ignore your boundaries, invalidate your feelings, and then sit back, watching the explosion they engineered. Every outburst becomes evidence. They'll say, "You're too emotional, you're crazy, or you need help," while conveniently ignoring the 1,000 small cuts that led you to that moment. They don't just manipulate reality, they manufacture it. They choreograph the scene so that when the curtain falls, they're calm, composed, and innocent, while you look like the villain of their story. Over time, you start trying to predict their mood, walking on eggshells, doing mental gymnastics to avoid confrontation. You become so focused on not upsetting them that you stop noticing how much of yourself you've lost in the process. You measure your tone, your words, even your facial expressions, trying to stay one step ahead of their next accusation. But there's no right way to appease someone who feeds off chaos. They want you off balance. Your anxiety is their proof of control. The more you suppress your feelings, the more they escalate their tactics. They might withdraw affection, start arguments over noths, or create jealousy just to see you react. Each reaction gives them fuel, a way to feel powerful, in control, superior. And when you finally break down, they switch into savior mode. They comfort you, calm you, tell you that everything will be okay. For a moment, it feels like peace, but it's not peace, it's conditioning. They're teaching you that the only relief comes from their approval. That's not love, that's captivity. The moment you recognize this cycle, you begin to take your power back. You stop defending yourself to someone who thrives on distortion. You learn to pause, to breathe, to refuse the bait. Silence becomes your weapon. Not the silence of fear, but the silence of clarity. You see their chaos for what it is, projection, not truth. Remember, someone who provokes your pain and then blames you for bleeding is not your healer. They are your lesson. You don't need to prove your sanity to the person who's trying to destroy it. You just need to reclaim your peace and walk away. The most powerful revenge isn't anger, it's calm. When you stop reacting, you take away their script, their spotlight, their control. They can no longer play the victim if you refuse to play the villain. They start by admiring you. They'll say things like, "You're incredible, so you're so talented, and I've never met anyone like you." You feel seen, appreciated, even valued. But admiration from a narcissist is never about love. It's about access. They're studying you, taking notes, collecting data. They're learning what makes you magnetic, what draws others to you, and what gives you confidence. Because soon they'll use it all to become a version of you. Only louder, shinier, emptier. They mimic your words, your style, your energy. And when people start noticing, you'll feel the strangest mix of confusion and violation. It's as if you're watching someone walk around wearing your skin. At first, it might feel flattering. They're inspired by me, you think. But inspiration turns to imitation, and imitation turns to erasure. They start telling your stories as if they lived them. They repeat your insights without giving you credit. They take your quirks, your laugh, your phrasing, your ideas, and present them to the world as theirs. Suddenly, people are complimenting them for things you created while you're left invisible. It's not just identity theft, it's psychological possession. They want your essence without your presence. And when you try to call it out, they'll gaslight you. You're imagining things. You don't own that idea. You're so insecure. They'll make you feel guilty for noticing, but you're not crazy. You're being drained. Narcissists are emotional parasites. They lack a stable sense of self, so they build one out of other people's light. They consume your personality, your creativity, your compassion until you start to fade. Then, when you're emptied, they discard you and move on, wearing your traits like a trophy. It's a cruel paradox. They envy you, but they also need you. They want what you have, but they can't admit it, so they destroy Yigong. out to become you. That's why they'll subtly devalue everything they steal. They'll mock your hobbies, criticize your style, downplay your intelligence, all while copying it behind your back. They can't let you see that they admire you because their ego can't bear it, so they cover admiration with contempt. The danger is how quietly this theft happens. You start to question yourself. You hesitate to create, to speak, to express, because you know they'll take it and twist it. You become smaller, quieter, more cautious. That's their end game, to silence your originality so their imitation looks authentic. But here's what they can never steal: the source. They can take your words, your tone, your moves, but they can't take the place those things come from. You are the origin. You are the well they keep trying to drink from, but wells never dry for long. When you stop feeding them with attention, they wither. When you stop reacting, they lose their reflection. The way out is reclamation. Start creating again. Speak in your own rhythm. Wear your style louder. Own your story so completely that their imitation looks obvious, because a copy only has power when the original forgets what it is. The narcissist may steal your reflection, but they'll never own your soul. When a narcissist feels they're losing control of you, they begin planning their next move long before you realize what's happening. They sense distance, independence, strength, and it terrifies them. To them, control is survival, and losing it feels like death. So they start building an escape plan or a destruction plan, sometimes both. They prepare the narrative, the witnesses, the storyline that will protect their image and destroy yours. Every conversation, every text, every reaction becomes part of their script. You think you're just living your life, but they're already rehearsing your downfall. It starts with subtle shifts. They withdraw emotionally but pretend everything's fine. They begin planting little comments to others. I'm worried about them. They've been acting strange lately. I think they're having a breakdown. It sounds like concern, but it's strategy. They're creating a version of you that seems unstable, and so when they leave or betray you, they look justified. That's the smear campaign before the storm. By the time you realize what's happening, people you trusted have already been quietly influenced. The narcissist doesn't just want to leave, they want to make sure you have nowhere to stand when they do. Then comes the switch. They start provoking you more frequently, pushing your buttons with precision. They want the grand finale, massa. The emotional outburst that proves their story. They'll ignore your messages, twist your words, or do something cruel, knowing it will make you react, and when you do, they'll capture it, literally or emotionally, and present it as evidence. See, this is what I've been dealing with. It's not just an exit, it's a performance. They need to walk away as the hero or the victim, never the villain. Sometimes, instead of leaving, they set traps to make you fall apart within the relationship. They'll sabotage your job, your friendships, your peace. They want you to collapse so they can stand over your ruins looking innocent. If you try to leave first, they'll switch tactics. Sudden love bombing, promises to change, tears. But those tears aren't regret. They're panic. They're not afraid of losing you. They're afraid of losing control of the story. What makes this phase so devastating is the confusion it creates. You can feel something ending, but you can't name it. You sense danger without evidence, and by the time the mask drops completely, you've already been discredited. People see only what the narcissist has prepared them to see, a distorted version of you. That's why it feels like being erased while you're still alive. But even in this chaos, you still hold the one thing they can't manipulate: truth. The way out is through clarity and quiet power. Stop explaining. Stop defending. Start documenting. Save messages, write notes, stay calm. Their biggest fear is your composure, because it reveals their performance. When you stop reacting, their story collapses. Remember, every narcissist plans an ending, but you get to decide the sequel. You rebuild your reputation, your peace, your self-worth, piece by piece. They may have written the script for your destruction, but you get to write the story of your comeback. And nothing terrifies a narcissist more than the person they couldn't break choosing to rise